Living in a rural part of northern Florida has its perks. Quiet nights, open skies, and a sense of seclusion. But it also has its downsides, like the creeping sense of isolation when things do go wrong. My parents had left for the weekend to visit my sister at college, leaving me to hold down the fort. It was a typical Friday night, and I was coming home from work, looking forward to a quiet evening of gaming. As I turned down our long circular gravel driveway, my headlights lit the back of an unfamiliar car parked right in front of our house. It was an old minivan with tinted windows so dark that I couldn't see anyone inside. I pulled up right behind it, and for a few tense moments, nothing happened. Just as I was about to get out and confront whoever it was, the car slowly shifted into gear and drove away, disappearing into the night. I shrugged it off, figuring it was someone who was just lost or needing to use the driveway to turn around. Our front door was unlocked as usual, a small town habit we'd done my entire life. The house was quiet and seemed undisturbed, so I settled into the couch to play video games with my headset on. I must have dozed off on the couch, but I woke up to a loud sound of movement upstairs, loud enough that I heard it around my headset. Groggy and disoriented, I initially thought my parents had come home early, but as I listened more closely, the sounds were wrong. Too deliberate, too heavy. My heart pounded as I realized someone was in my parents' bedroom, which was just over my head. I grabbed a flashlight and the baseball bat we kept by the front door and crept upstairs. The door to their room was ajar, and I could see the flickering of a small flame. I pushed the door open, and there, in the dim light, was a woman crouched in my parents' closet. She was lighting their clothes on fire. One by one, her face twisted into a manic grin. The flames cast creepy shadows across her face, making her look almost demonic. Before I could react, she noticed me and started laughing, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that sent chills down my spine. She grabbed a handful of burning clothes and hurled them at me. I dodged, the clothes landing in a heap at my feet, setting the carpet on fire. I bolted from the room, listening to her laughter echo behind me as I stumbled down the stairs and out the front door. I called 911, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what was happening. The fire spread quickly, and by the time the police and the fire department arrived and put out the fire, the woman was long gone, but the damage was done. My parents' room was a charred mess, and the smell of smoke was everywhere. The police took my statement and said she was probably just some drugged-out woman who'd wandered onto our property, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. Her laughter, the way she seemed to relish the chaos, it felt personal, targeted. I couldn't remember much about the minivan, but I told them all I could. My parents were horrified when I told them what happened, and they cut their trip short. We started locking the doors, and we installed security cameras, but there's no going back to that sense of safety we had. Every creak in the house, every rustle outside keeps me on edge. I can't forget that woman's face, the sound of her laughter, or the way she looked at me with those wild eyes. It's been 4 months, and deep down I know she could come back anytime she wanted. Losing my parents in my 20s plunged me into a dark abyss. I had been very close to them, and their sudden absence left a gaping void in my life. I couldn't confide in friends. They couldn't understand the pain I was going through. They all had their parents. The grief consumed me, driving me to seek answers in places most people avoided. I began delving into the occult, hoping that somehow I could find a way to speak to them again. My days were spent in a haze of depression and my nights wandering alone around abandoned places. These buildings, once alive with human activity, now stood as empty shells. I found a strange comfort in their decay, feeling that somehow the spirits of the past still lingered there. In these derelict spaces, I felt closer to my parents, as if their presence was surrounding me, unseen but palpable. One evening, I snuck into an old abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. The building was a maze of crumbling walls and shattered windows, and I found a spot where I could sit, hidden away from the world, and began talking to my parents. I told them how much I missed them, how lost I felt without their guidance and their friendship. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my heart to the empty air. As the evening deepened into night, the building became eerily quiet. I decided it was time to leave and stood up, wiping my eyes, and that's when I noticed him. There was a guy standing half hidden behind the only door towards the exit. He was thin, with dirty, greasy hair hanging limply around his face. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes pierced right through mine. I hadn't heard anyone enter. My heart raced as I realized how vulnerable I was. The man's presence filled me with terror, and his words were unforgettable. "I can send you to them." Panic surged through me. I turned and bolted towards one of the broken windows, my mind screaming for escape. I squeezed myself through the jagged frame, feeling the glass scrape against my skin. As I landed on the other side, I turned to look back. The guy was now standing in the room, his eyes locked onto mine. He made no move to follow, but watched with a disturbing calmness as I ran. I sprinted to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I fumbled with my keys, finally managing to unlock the door and throw myself inside. As I sped away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I could still see the man standing at the window, his figure growing smaller as I put distance between us. I never returned to that warehouse or any other abandoned building. The encounter had shaken me to my core. The man's words haunted me, making me question the dark paths I'd been treading. I realized that in seeking to connect with the dead, I had invited something else entirely into my life. I had almost joined them. Even now, years later, I sometimes think about that man watching me from the shadows, and I can never forget the words he had said. "I can send you to them." If you like these stories, this is the place for you. I cover scary stories about ghosts, cryptids, paranormal events, and disturbing, creepy human encounters. My Etsy store is open if you'd like to support me there. The link's in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.